Cheers, guys. Epyx911. Welcome to the Elitist Geek. A little bit of a sobering tech vlog this week. As many of you know, I am half Dutch, half German. So I went from the highs of the World Cup to having my teams finish first and third to the horrible, tragic news involving the Malaysian Boeing 777 airliner going down over the Ukraine. And it got me thinking about technology. I'm a horrible flyer. I have a phobia of heights, open heights in particular. I'm okay in an airplane once I've reached cruising altitude. The logical mind knows it's the safest form of travel. The logical mind knows that structurally a 737-200 or a 777 Boeing or Airbus 320 or whatever, turbulence to one of those aircraft is nothing more than a slightly bumpy road would be for your car. I know that. But when you have a phobia, for me flying, and part of that is loss of control. I'm also not a good passenger in a car. I like to have the control of the wheels. I've got no problem driving in New York City, Los Angeles, wherever that is. I've driven in all those cities as long as I'm in control. If I'm the passenger, forget about it. I'm a horrible backseat driver to the point where people would probably get pissed off and dump my ass on the road and make me walk. I just don't do well in circumstances where I don't have the control. And of course, flying is the ultimate form of that, because if something goes wrong up there, the only person you have to rely on is the flight crew. There is no one else. Unless you get lucky and one of the people, one of your fellow passengers is a pilot or an engineer, you're out of luck. And so I know that. I know it's a safe way to go. But it really got me thinking about technology as a whole. When tragedies like that happen, they're usually because of human error. Whether it's human error causing a manufacturing flaw, which leads to catastrophic mechanical failure, or whether it's human error like the co-pilot on the Air France plane that continued to pull back on his throttle and basically caused the plane to ultimately drop altitude and disintegrate into the ocean. It's amazing technology we're surrounded by. It's fucking amazing. And you, me, and everyone else should be so grateful, because the other thing it got me thinking about is how few people on this planet can actually build one of the things that you and I take so for granted. Take the camera that I have here, the camcorder. Anybody who's a bit of a camera enthusiast would probably, let's take a step back. You've got the person who doesn't have a freaking clue how a camera even works. They totally just take it for granted. Point, click, operate, read a bit of the instruction manual, have somebody show them, but couldn't even roughly sketch on paper how a camera actually works. Then you've got people who are hobbyists and professionals that use a camera, that know a bit more, but still couldn't even begin to build a camera on their own. Then you've got engineers who are involved in part of the process. They may be engineers that deal with the lens apparatus on a camcorder. Some engineers that deal with the sound portion. The bridging between the two has another group of engineers. But each company, whether it's Canon or Logitech or Samsung with their TVs or Sony with their PlayStations, only has a handful of engineers in their organization that are intimately familiar with the process from start to finish in terms of design inception and having it roll off the assembly line. Because almost all these pieces of technology that we so take for granted most of the time are assembly mass produced. They have specialists in many areas bringing all the parts to create the whole. So it got me thinking, if we ever had a post-apocalyptic type situation and we lost those people who could build these things, me, you, and a lot of everybody else would basically revert to how humanity was a few hundred years ago, probably even further. You see what happens when you take a modern person and you put them in the middle of nowhere and you say, start a fire. You know, without a magnifying glass to, magnify the sun's rays. Here's a stick and some string. Build me a fire. Well, there's humans. You take a group of about 20 people. There's probably about half that know the idea on how to get a fire. You know, you create the friction and you make the ember, and there's a handful of people that know how to do that. There's probably one or two only in that group that are going to be able to carry out that from start to finish and ultimately make the fire. And even them, it could take a day or two. So when I say humanity would be flung back 100 years, that's probably actually being very conservative. We may go back hundreds of years, because even the technology they had in the Victorian era, steam locomotive, for example, who is alive and around after a post-apocalyptic scenario to even build that? They may know the theory, but the process from start to finish, not likely. Computer. I'm an IT guy. I work with computers every day. I build and design wide area networks. I manage the infrastructure and software implementations. But I wouldn't have a fucking clue if you asked me to build a motherboard from start to finish. I know the basics. I know the theory about the pipelines and, the video portion, the buses, the CPU socket. But could I actually build one? Hell no. And there's people at a company like ASUS or Acer, that know their specialty, but they themselves couldn't build a motherboard from start to finish. One or two people only. And then providing they have the tools. They may know how to build it with a certain set of tools, but there's no guarantee they could build the tools that they need, right? In a post-apocalyptic scenario. So those were kind of my thoughts around that tragedy. I know it goes off on a tangent a bit, but you take something as sophisticatingly beautiful as a 777, the fact that it can fly at all, and those are the thoughts I have when I'm 30,000 plus feet in the air. I'm in a freaking metal bucket. The fact that it can fly at all because of how flight works, how the physics of flight works, is a miracle, let alone building one. So yes, I know it's the safest way to go. I hate doing it. It's going to suck going in September because I've got all this stuff on my mind. I love traveling, but it's the being there, not the getting there, that I enjoy. Unless it's driving. I love driving. But again, control issue. So what I'd like you guys to do, and what I know I'm going to do tonight, spend a couple of minutes, Be grateful to those people that provide us with the technology. Be grateful for the one or two individuals of any given piece of technology that could see that actually be built from start to finish. And then think of the hundreds and thousands of people that are involved in their little part of that process. And then, of course, think of the victims who, like the Dutch guy who took a picture of the airliner before he got on board and said, jokingly referencing the Malaysian airliner that had gone missing, "This is what the plane looks like. If it goes missing, you'll know." And 5 hours later, he was dead. Macabre, disturbing, sorrowful, horrible tragedy. And it looks at this point like it's either Russian rebels or Ukrainian military, who knows? They'll get to the bottom of that. My thoughts are with the victims and the extended families and friends in Holland and other parts of the world that are directly impacted by this tragedy. So my thoughts are with them, but also with the people that make it possible in the first place to make a flight like that, to go on vacation, to play video games, to enjoy technology like we do. I know it's a little more somber than usual, guys, but there's hope in all of that. There's definitely hope in all of that. And I think it's okay to be grateful for what we have and appreciative. And just makes us that much better in the long run. Next one won't be quite as heavy, guys. As always, cheers.